Francisco 49ers and star wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk not close in their contract negotiation. Still plenty of time, but is Brandon Aiyuk getting a little nervous? Some social media stylings from Brandon Aiyuk. What is meant there from some cryptic messages? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate our everydayers, and we love it when you are subscribed on YouTube. Hit that notification bell, the thumbs up. Helps us tremendously. And of course, you can subscribe everywhere you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Brandon Aiyuk's trolling us, Croc. He's trolling us. Some reports from Jeremy Fowler over the last few days here, the weekend. Hope everyone had a great holiday weekend, by the way. We didn't get the morning pod up today, so we're going a little bit live a little bit late in the morning in Pacific time, maybe lunchtime for you if you're on the East Coast here on this Tuesday episode. Reports from Jeremy Fowler, Croc, that the 49ers are not particularly close, that they have not progressed. Here's the quote. I'm told the 49ers are certainly open to doing a deal, but talks have not progressed enough to where things are close, according to Jeremy Fowler. And according to the report, the Brandon Aiyuk camp is asking for Amon-Ra St. Brown money, or maybe trying to beat Amon-Ra St. Brown's contract he did with the Detroit Lions this offseason. But really what sparks this from me today, we'll get more into those reports and kind of compare Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brandon Aiyuk, where we think things should go for the 49ers. How big of the pie does Brandon Aiyuk want from the 49ers? Both the pie that is sliced up with the salary cap, and the portion of the pie from touches and targets in Kyle Shanahan's offense, Croc. Because on Instagram, and immediately we get tagged in it and get asked about it, Brandon Aiyuk posted on Instagram today. He said, he didn't say it. It's just a text on the screen. There's no audio. It's just a picture of Brandon Aiyuk's face. It's one of the boomerangs where it's just, repeating, and it's just his face. He's in the car, and it says this, Croc, quote, "I'm way too hungry to be splitting my food up like that." Is Brandon Aiyuk trolling us? A little cryptic message that wide receivers like to send. It's not always all about football. Was he just talking about breakfast on this Tuesday morning? Or was he talking about the barbecue that he had on Memorial Day, that he didn't want to split up his food with somebody? Or is this a message about the San Francisco 49ers? He doesn't want to split up his cash. He doesn't want to split up targets. He wants it all, Croc. How do you take this from Brandon Aiyuk? Is he trolling us? I think he is.
I think that was part of your initial thing, right? You're like, I think he's trolling us. And I said, nah, I don't think he's trolling. One thing about Brandon Aiyuk, and his situation is what it is. First, okay, so we got to just start with the contract negotiations, where they're at right now. 49ers players, they've been getting signed or extended late in the process, like approaching training camp. So from that standpoint, not worried about anything. And from a negotiation tactic standpoint, we saw a lot of this with Deebo Samuel, where he was maybe frustrated with the process, and eventually the deal got done. So for Brandon Aiyuk, I'm assuming that at some point it'll get done, but he's going through some of the same frustrations as Deebo Samuel did. So you look at this situation now and his post. One thing about Brandon Aiyuk, I guess you could say Deebo as well, they got to let you know how they're feeling throughout the process. So if he's saying, hey, y'all coming at me about, well, we got all these different mouths to feed. How can we pay you top of the market? You don't get as many. He's like, dude, I'm way too hungry to be splitting my money up. All right. So that's cool. You feel that way about, all the players and everybody that you got going on. But what does that have to do with me getting my money with the way that I want my money? So I take it for what he's saying. I feel like he's a guy that's always told us how he feels after the Super Bowl, where he wasn't heavily targeted, didn't have a whole lot of production, What'd he do? Went to social media, showed his jersey in one game, showed his jersey in the Super Bowl. He wasn't trolling. He's just telling you how he felt at that moment. And I think this is just another instance of Brandon Aiyuk, who really is kind of a man of few words, is telling you like, hey, this is how I feel right now. So it could be a message to the fans. It could be a message to the 49ers. I don't think he cares about that part, like who receives it. He's just letting everybody know how he feels.
He has made statements on social media that are pretty simple. And I think the greatest example is the one you brought up about the jerseys, right? The clean jersey after the Super Bowl. That was a statement. And I don't know if this is a statement or not. Don't want to look too much into it. Not everything that a football player puts on social media is about football. I put stuff on my social media that's not about football. Depending on the platform, my Instagram is not about football at all. There's a Locked On 49ers Instagram that I should be more active on, and I'm not. Maybe need to hire a social media producer, Croc. But when it comes to players, they say a lot of cryptic, like a weird sentence that doesn't connect to anything. How often do you tweet stuff like that? How often do you put stuff on Instagram where people can't figure out what you're talking about? So from that aspect, you might be right, Croc, because he knows that everyone else is going to know what he's talking about. So he's either trolling us or he's trying to tell us something.
A lot of times the people like that, they put things out there, they're a little discreet, and then people try to guess, and they're like, man, y'all don't even know what you guys are talking about. Yeah. But more times than not, people do know what they're talking about. Yeah. It's like they put it out there, they felt a certain way, and they want to act like it's this big mystery. Like, it's not a mystery. This entire time, you've told everybody how you felt about everything. And I see that on social media. People tell their whole lives and then want to act like when something looks a little weird, like, oh, there's a little something off here. This isn't how this person typically posts. And they say something that is along the lines of how they, share certain things or should talk about their emotions, etc. They try to act like everybody is wrong about whatever it is, and they want to be discreet about it. Like, nah, dude, you've told us exactly how you feel in every moment. And right now, a lot of it has to do with his negotiations and how it's going. And if I had to guess, probably going a lot like all the other guys, which made it to where they didn't get signed until approaching training camp. And that for some people, that might be uneasy to not truly know exactly what is coming up for you. And there's a lot of guys that they don't want to play on a 5th-year contract. Like, man, give me the big money so I have my long-term security. I got kids. I got a girl, whatever it is. I want the long-term security. You don't have that when you're playing year to year in the NFL.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knows how people are going to take it. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I'll throw it up on the screen here. I'm way too hungry to be splitting my food up like that. So we are going to address how big of the pie we think Brandon Aiyuk should get from the 49ers, both salary-wise and when it comes to target share. Croc, did you have something you want to say about his post here?
Yeah, I am. It makes me happy that he used the right form of two. I see a lot of these athletes, and it's like, I get it. You guys probably didn't really, go to a lot of classes. You're trying to be 3 and done. So you don't know which one. Do I use TO or TOO? But he used the right one. So I was really excited about that.
He's a smart dude. He's a smart dude. He knows what he's doing right here too. When he posts stuff like that. And to be honest with you, if you are an athlete and you're posting stuff that's not about football and it's, and there's no context provided, then provide some context. If you don't want people to take it out of context and get it wrong, then let us know. Right. So
that's the easy way to do it. If you are in that light, I mean, I don't know how many followers on Instagram Brandon Aiyuk has, but I'd assume 80% of them are 49er fans. So even on your social media, you might want it to be about family or whatever, but who's watching your stuff. I know on mine, on my Instagram, I don't talk a lot of 49ers football, right? I just, it's just my fam. I post my kids, or I might post some stuff of me coaching or whatever. So I know the audience I have there and how they'll react to certain things that I post. And there's certain things I stay away from because I understand the audience I have. So unless he's just not aware and doesn't read the room well, which I don't think is the case. I think he reads the room very well. I think he knows what he's posting.
All right, next. How big of the pie should Brandon Aiyuk be getting salary-wise, target share-wise as well? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by GameTime. GameTime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and prices on GameTime and the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. We're talking about killer last-minute deals, up to 60% off savings when buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you. There are flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of a game or event, zone deals where you choose the section, let GameTime choose the seats, and my favorite aspect maybe of GameTime is the all-in pricing. You toggle on all-in pricing so you see the total up front. You don't get hit with those surprise fees at checkout, and you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. It's awesome. You pull up the seats, you look around with the app, and you can see what it's going to look like when you're sitting in those seats. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets and more with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I want to go to a question in the chat really quick here, Croc. And this one is from Invader. And Invader 49ers says, question for Mr. Crocker. I'm not going to answer it because he's addressing you, Croc. Do the 49ers wait on big contracts right before training camp due to injury concerns or for another reason?
Now, I just think that's just the way negotiations go. And look at the Dallas Cowboys right now. I'm pretty sure they're in talks with CeeDee Lamb, but there's no contract that's done. You know, you just, there's a lot of jockeying for position. Some negotiations can be very simple, right? Brian Peacock reached out to me, said, hey, Croc, you want to come over here? I'll give you this percentage. I said, cool. It took all of 45 minutes to get that deal done. It takes a lot longer to get these deals done at the NFL level. And, you know, you got one guy coming in on the high end, you got one guy coming in on the low end, and then they want to work to try to get to as close to the middle as possible. And anybody that is married, you understand how these negotiations go as well with the wife.
Yeah, Croc, you left out the biggest part of it is you had to ask your wife first. And so I don't think it's going to take Brandon Aiyuk and his wife, 4 months to figure out if they want to sign a deal or not. It's all about that number. And yeah, this is a negotiation. The agent writes a number on a piece of paper, slides it over the desk to the virtual desk to John Lynch. And if the 49ers don't want to meet that number, they slide a different number over. And then maybe you wait, right? Because neither side wants to say yes to the other guy's number, especially if there's a big gap. So you start working towards it. And then you say, okay, well, look, less per year. Maybe there's more guarantees here. How about a longer deal? How about a shorter deal, more money? And then you start to figure out how you can each get closer to your deal. And it can take some time. And if you're playing hardball, like the 49ers tend to do in these contract negotiations, it can take some time and you end up waiting quite a bit. If the 49ers were willing to meet Brandon Aiyuk's number, the deal would be done right now.
I'm curious to see when the smoke and dust settles, what is this number? Because we are hearing different reports, right? I try not to look too much into these reports. Brandon Aiyuk wants money that St. Brown got.
Yeah.
I try not to look too much into that. Does his agent think that he's going to get $30 million a year? And St. Brown's contract is very interesting because it's not what it seems to be. And there are a lot of people that broke it down. They can break it down better than me. But I do know that the numbers that are thrown out there are probably numbers thrown out there from his agent to make the contract sound better than it is. But for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, what's he going to go off of? What's his agent going to go off of? St. Brown got $30 million. We want that. Now, again, that could be them coming in on the high end and the 49ers coming in on the low end. Nope, we're going to give you Christian Kirk money. And he's like, absolutely not, right? You're not giving me $19, $20 million a year. So where do they meet in the middle? And how long does it take to get there? What about the guaranteed money? Again, that St. Brown contract is structured very odd, in my opinion. Does Brandon Aiyuk want something that is structured very odd? Have you looked at St. Brown's contract and how people have talked about it?
Yeah, let's get into St. Brown's contract. So April 24th, he signed this deal with the Detroit Lions, 4 years, $120 million, $120 million, $0.01 million contract extension with the Lions. That 0.01, I wonder if there's somebody else had 120 that he had to get over on top of. So it was a $120.01 million contract, $77 million in guarantees, of which 73.634 million of that are new guarantees. So, kind of added on to his already existing rookie contract. The full guarantee at signing, $34.66 million, which is about half of his total guarantees, are fully guaranteed at signing. Then there's option bonuses in here, and the option bonus in 2025 becomes fully guaranteed. If St. Brown's on the roster on the third day of the 2025 league year, St. Brown's $27.5 million salary in 2026 will become fully guaranteed. So there's always a lot of those things where the agent throws out, okay, here's the full total guarantees, but things have to happen to trigger all the guarantees for them to all come about and happen. And you would think that, next year, 2025, the third day of the league year, St. Brown will be on the roster. So very likely that 2026 salary does become fully guaranteed. But anyway, 4 years, 120 is the number for Amon-Ra St. Brown.
And Brandon, I could say, well, I don't want to have to be on the roster 3 days after the new year for this amount of money to become guaranteed. Why can't I just get this portion guaranteed because I do X, Y, Z? Right? Maybe it could be performance incentive, as opposed to if we feel like cutting you, then you're just out of another 27 million. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are the conversations that are happening.
A bunch of void years as well. So the contract is a 4-year extension that starts in 2025 after his rookie contract is up in 2024. So it goes from 2025 through 2028. This is the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract. Then there's 3 void years, 29, 30, and 31, to knock down some of those cap hits throughout the contract as well. And we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing the 49ers start to do some of those things as well with void years. And I think you can have a max of 3 void years, which is what we see on this contract. They were throwing in void years for Colton McKivitz and Yetur Gross-Matos. And so the 49ers are really trying to figure this cap out with, how many expensive contracts they have and how many cornerstone players they're paying all at the same time. And Brandon Aiyuk is most likely going to be the next one. I think there's just a lot to figure out and hammer out, even if they agreed on a number. Even if the 49ers are like, cool, $30 million a year, 4 years, 120, let's go. Aiyuk's camp says that's the right number. They still got to figure out all those things. Guaranteed. When does this trigger? How much is guaranteed here? What's the signing bonus? What's the fully guaranteed? What's the partial guarantees? And so there's just a lot to figure out with these contracts.
I think this is a big part of the contract. And right here, Golden Dragon number 5 says San Francisco don't have a number 1 target. There's no way they pay a wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown money. St. Brown is by far Lions' number 1 target, and he faces the best coverage. So that's probably a big part of why the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk are on like different sides of the spectrum. From Aiyuk's standpoint, we'll start with the 49ers. The 49ers run their offense, and because of the way they run their offense, and maybe because there's not a number 1 guy in the sense of just we're going to feature this guy in this gameplay outside of CMC. Matter of fact, there is a number 1 guy. It's Christian McCaffrey. But as far as in the passing game, there is no wide receiver 1. They run their offense, and based off of how they run their offense, these things should happen. And if these things happen, Brandon Aiyuk, you'll be more successful, as opposed to we're going to do things to make Brandon Aiyuk more successful. And because of that, I bet Kyle, and I remember Kyle saying the system makes the quarterback doesn't make the system. I bet he also thinks the system makes the receiver doesn't have to make this system. Like you're not Julio Jones. So if you're not Julio, then I'll just run my offense. And if I just run my offense, like, you'll be productive within it. Now, are you even within being productive in it? Are you going to do things that Julio did? Probably not, right? But you'll still have a certain level of success, which we've seen from Aiyuk having over 1,000 last year. And he said it, 1,000-yard receiver as a 4th option. And then last year, He was a 1,350-yard receiver. And in my opinion, he's still the fourth option in the offense, even though he's targeted the most. But in the sense of how Kyle creates his game plan, I think he's the fourth guy that Kyle gets to. And it's just like, well, I know what to expect from him. He's good. He's going to do this. He's going to do this. So these things are kind of built in. But I don't think he bases his entire game plan around what Aiyuk does best. It's what Kyle does best and how all these guys are able to do certain things. So I think you're right. He's not used like a traditional receiver. I've said it plenty of times on here. My brother said, hey, man, you guys don't value the same way Cowboys, my brother's a Cowboy fan, value CeeDee Lamb. If you watch any Dallas Cowboy game, you'll notice they have him lined up here. They motion him here. They do this. They run pick plays. They do all these things to make sure that they get the ball in his hands because they value him as, hey, this is a key piece to our offense. I think the 49ers are struggling to pay Brandon Aiyuk because of that. That's not to say that they don't want to. I think he blocks very well. They love his mindset. He's gritty. He's out there trying to fight Fred Warner in practice, right? You know, like he brings a lot of what they want from a mindset standpoint, but from a schematic standpoint, I think it's, hey, we do value how well he does these things, but not to the extent of paying him $30 million a year. And he'll never get those kind of targets. I don't want to say never. He will likely not get those kind of targets with the 49ers unless everybody gets hurt or they're down a ton, which we don't foresee happening. So I think that is probably a big part of the holdup and why maybe at this moment they are further apart than Brandon Aiyuk would ideally like them to be.
I want to go a little further down that rabbit hole and the usage for Brandon Aiyuk next, Croc. And I do foresee a time when Brandon Aiyuk could be that. The question for me, though, is when he becomes the focal point of the San Francisco 49ers offense. We'll get to that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. $5 win gets you $150 extra bucks to play with on FanDuel. Bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. You don't want to bet on the NBA or the NHL? No problem. You can bet on all of those NFL futures as well. Bet on the 49ers, who are the betting favorite right now at FanDuel to win the next Super Bowl. Offensive, defensive, rookies of the year, and a whole lot more. Find it all at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This is where I can't figure out how much of the pie Brandon Aiyuk should be getting, will be getting, and how Kyle Shanahan views Brandon Aiyuk. Because, so the 49ers drafted Ricky Pearsall, right? And, you know, it looks like, okay, you sign Aiyuk, then maybe Debo goes, and then I think Pearsall's best fit is kind of the Z receiver. You keep him off the line, move him around, get him away from press coverage a little bit more, and Aiyuk's kind of in a similar role. Is that X receiver, because a lot of stuff that Brandon Aiyuk does is a little bit more backside of plays and the offense isn't run through him. Would it still remain that way, or would the pecking order start to shift a little bit, Croc? Because we shouldn't expect that Christian McCaffrey is going to be around in 2027. We shouldn't expect that Deebo Samuel is going to be around in 2027. But we should expect Brandon Aiyuk, if he signs this deal, would be around and then would be the main focal point of the offense. But if he stays in the position he's in now, is that a focal player in Kyle Shanahan's offense?
So that's the big question. Khalil Young in the chat says, completely disagree with the landscape of the offense. Several players won't be here on the offense. That's where you have to try to find out how much does Kyle value what Aiyuk does, and does he feel like he can get somebody else to do something similar, right? It could be as simple in Kyle's mind as this. Can right now, right, with the way that the roster is currently constructed, and we know Kyle Shanahan doesn't really look far ahead, kind of lives a little bit more in the moment with how things are. Does he feel like, all right, right now, I can draft a receiver at pick 31, and with Debo and CMC and George Kittle and those guys taking a lot of the attention off of him, can this guy be productive? Can I get a receiver to be productive in my offense that's not the focal point from defenses? And if that is the question in his brain, I think he answers it with yes. Yes, I can. Now, can I get them to be as good as Brandon Aiyuk has been? Now, maybe that's more in the future, but can I get somebody to just be productive right now? Heck, I had Richie James go for 9 catches for 100 and something yards, 160 yards and a touchdown in the game. You don't think I could do that with Ricky Pearsall? Like, you don't think I could do that with Jacob Cowling? Like, that just might be how he's thinking. And so then from that standpoint, he's just looking at, hey, we got this guys. Obviously, we would love to plan for the future, but even in the future, I still don't want to build my offense around the passing game and this receiver, whether it's right now and I have all these guys, or whether it's in 3 years and George Kittle is retired and Deebo Samuel has been traded and CMC is done, right? Like, even then, am I still going to want the premise of my offense to be focused on a receiver in the passing game? I say no. I think he's still going to want it to be heavily, run action dependent with timing and rhythm and hitting guys in space, which he feels like he creates the space for the guys. So I understand what Khalil Young is saying, and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect logic. I understand you completely. I don't know if Kyle cares.
Kyle definitely doesn't care, and it's game plan specific, I think, week to week as well. If Kyle thinks that, okay, look, I need an X receiver, it's going to be a backside of plays and it's never going to be a focal point of the offense, they probably should have traded him during the draft, right? If that's the case. I don't necessarily think that's the case. And Aiyuk can play all the wide receiver spots. But then the curious part is when you see their vision, they're telling us what they think. And maybe they envision Aiyuk morphing into a role where he's in the slot more. He's moved around and getting more of these targets where they're force feeding him the football, and someone like Ricky Pearsall is the number 2 guy and he's lined up more as an X and doing the backside stuff. But I just don't know if that fits from what their skill sets are, especially what we envision post-draft of what Ricky Pearsall is going to be in the offense. And like knowing the different positions, being able to play X, being able to play Z is different than this guy is the X, this guy is the Z. And I'd be a little bit surprised if Aiyuk kind of flips roles and is way more like Z and moved around and he's in the slot. Because the Amon-Ra St. Brown comparisons, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 164 targets last year. No wide receiver's ever going to get that in Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Unless you're Julio. Julio got 200 targets one year.
Did he get 200 targets?
With Kyle Shanahan.
Dang.
That was a year where I think they started off good, then they fell off, and they were losing a lot of games. Julio, that might have been his 1,800-yard season. He was heavily targeted. But then if you look at the next year, when they were actually really good, his targets were down. And it was probably more along the lines of what Kyle Shanahan would ideally want, where it's a more even offense as opposed to leaning on one guy. I think he had 88 catches the next year. But obviously, like, they went to a Super Bowl.
And then you wonder, okay, could the 49ers start to, in a post-McCaffrey era, the Niners and Shanahan's still going to run the ball, right? But could they start to lean into your $50 million quarterback throwing to your $30 million wide receiver and lean in more to a drop back passing game where they do start slinging the ball around a little bit more in this offense, Croc? When you start looking towards 2026 and what this team might look like, even as soon as 2025, could that start to happen? Maybe in 2024, you start to see that transition. So that would be interesting if the ball is just in the air more often for the 49ers because of the trust that Kyle Shanahan has in his quarterback and what that offense could start to look like.
I can see that. And you definitely see a rapport between Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk. But one of the few things that gives me pause in the sense of an Aiyuk role growing, I think it was very clear that Aiyuk was the best pass catching option for the 49ers. And even then, when it came down to some of the biggest moments, he was not a guy that they did anything to future him to get him the ball on any kind of consistent basis. When the game was on the line and it's 3rd and 4 from inside the 10 in overtime of the Super Bowl, Brandon Aiyuk was to the backside of the play. Like the quarterback was looking front side to Juwan Jennings. It wasn't even, hey, like Aiyuk is our guy. He's the best in beating man in these situations. What are we going to do to figure out a way to get him to rock right now? Like they didn't do that. They just ran a play. And I think that's some of the frustrations with Aiyuk. Like I see, like nobody is putting him in the tier of a St. Brown, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb. And Aiyuk is probably saying, the only reason y'all not is because they don't use me the same way. If you put me in Dallas, if there was no CeeDee Lamb in Dallas and you swapped him with Brandon Aiyuk, I bet Aiyuk is telling you, like, I can do that. I can do the things he's doing. I beat man coverage. I can. I whoop guys. And if I'm struggling to, maybe there's a game, okay, they're doing some good things about me. Well, now they move guys around. And the 49ers just don't do that with him. CeeDee Lamb, if CeeDee Lamb is ever struggling on the outside, you know what Cowboys are going to do? They're just going to move him into the slot.
Yeah.
Snap the ball before the DB can get set. Do all these things to help free him up, and then just, all right, now you just catch the ball and do your thing. And the 49ers it feels like there's no, and this isn't just about him getting money and stuff. I've had an issue with this for over a year now with the 49ers passing offense, which they don't have a legit drop back passing game, and they free guys up in the sense of the scheme. But when a team says, all right, we're just going to go man up, then how are you going to free your guys up? And almost like there's no change up. And you have a guy that clearly has the ability to do it, and they don't. So it just tells me, since we got in these situations, high pressure situations, and we still weren't making it a focal point to free our best pass catcher up in space, get him in more situations that more give him the advantage, right? Get his safety on him, get a linebacker on him, get him to settle down in certain areas. Instead, it's, well, we're just going to have you stationary. You either be outside or in a tight split and beat man coverage right now. And if you do, then, hey, we'll get you the ball. If you don't, then whatever, we'll go somewhere else instead of helping them. And I think that tells me a lot of what I need to know about how Kyle Shanahan views not Aiyuk, but really just his offense.
And I would buy it if Brandon Aiyuk had the argument, and this might be part of the negotiations, and Brandon Aiyuk saying, look, what the things I do and the targets I get and what I'm asked to do is a higher degree of difficulty than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I should get more than him because you're freeing him up, asking him to do all the stuff in the slot. I have the more difficult job, and my targets are more valuable, even though I had 50 less targets than Amon-Ra St. Brown did this year.
It is, and there's two sides to that, right? You could say, well, St. Brown may get more attention from defenses, so that could be a little bit more, that could be more difficult. But you also get better matchups because of motioning and moving them around. Not all corners or outside guys are going to go slide in that nickel and play man against somebody that's quicker and shifty like St. Brown in space. There's not a lot of boundary corners strengths. And Aiyuk has been tasked with just stay there and just win this matchup. And St. Brown is not asked to do that on a consistent basis. Lamb is not asked to do that on a consistent basis. AJ Brown, if you look at how much he's inside, he's not asked to do that on a consistent basis. Like DK Metcalf is. DK Metcalf, they line him up and just say, hey, just go win with speed. But then they also have Tyler Lockett. I don't know, 49ers, it doesn't come across as if they value their passing game in the sense of freeing one guy up. We have all these guys. We're going to run this offense. And you have 1,300 yards. This is why you also better sign right now. You got to have 1,300 yards this year, 1,350 or whatever we went for. Then the next year, you can have 900.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if he doesn't lead the NFL in yards per catch, is he a 1,350 yard receiver?
He had more targets the year before. He had 9 more targets in 2022 than he did in 2023, yet he had 300 more yards with fewer targets last year because of his yards per catch. Bottom line is, hold your water, everybody. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Don't hate the Niners because the deal's not done yet. Don't hate Aiyuk because the deal's not done yet. It's going to get done. It just takes a little time. This is how those negotiations go. And along the way, we'll have some fun reports and some fun cryptic messages on social media. No doubt. We'll address them at those times. All right. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Make sure you subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.